Hi, my name is Toby Pierce, and I'd like to share a devotional thought with you today. We're continuing our journey through the book of Acts, and last time we were in the first part of Acts chapter 21, and we left Paul, the Apostle Paul, in Caesarea at the home of Philip, the evangelist, for several days. Philip was one of the seven chosen in Acts chapter 6 to minister to the widows. And we saw him in Acts chapter 8 preaching to the Samaritans and meeting up with the Ethiopian eunuch and teaching him the gospel and baptizing him. And so here in Acts 21, verse 10 that we looked at last time says that Paul and his companions stayed with Philip for many days. And so beginning today, in Acts 21 and verse 15. After these days, we got ready and went up to Jerusalem, and some of the disciples from Caesarea went with us, bringing us to the house of Mason of Cyprus, an early disciple, with whom we should lodge. When we had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. After greeting them, he related one by one the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified God. Now remember back in Acts chapter 15, the apostles and elders met in Jerusalem to discuss the Gentiles, and it was what James said in that meeting that carried and became what they would ask the Gentiles to observe. So Acts 20, last part of Acts 21 again, last part of Acts of verse 20. And they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. They are all zealous for the law, and they have been told about you." Now wait, what have they been told about Paul? "That you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs." Verse 22. "What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Do therefore what we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take these men and purify yourself along with them, and pay their expenses, so that they may shave their heads. Thus all will know that there is nothing in what they have been told about you, but that you yourself also live in observance of the law. But as for the Gentiles who have believed, we have sent a letter with our judgment that they should abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality." See, that gets back to Acts chapter 15 and what they had told the Gentiles at that point. The elders and the apostles, and particularly what James had said. And so here there was that same James. So they're telling Paul here that rumors have gone around about him, and they want Paul to bend over backwards to make an extraordinary effort to show that these rumors are not true. Verse 26, "Then Paul took the men the next day. He purified himself along with them and went into the temple, giving notice when the days of purification should be fulfilled, and the offering presented for each one of them." So Paul did what he was asked. You know, Paul told the Corinthians in the Corinthian letter, 1 Corinthians 9, beginning of verse 19, He said, for though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews, I became as a Jew, in order to win Jews. To those under the law, I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law, I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that I might by all means save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessing. So that's why Paul did all this. Back in Acts 21, verse 27. When the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man who is teaching everyone, everywhere, against the people and the law, and this place," talking about the temple. "Moreover, he even brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place." For they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, with Paul, in the city, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. Now see, that didn't really happen, but they thought that, okay, we saw Paul with this Gentile, and we saw Paul in the temple, so Paul must have brought him into the temple. They're just assuming something here that's just flat not true, and they're ready to kill Paul over it. So even though Paul had just spent 7 days going above and beyond to be the best Jew around, people with hearts that are not godly stir up Jerusalem against him. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever just really bent over backwards, done extraordinary things for somebody to try to show them that they're not right, that they've been wrong about something that they've judged you about, and yet even after those extraordinary measures, it doesn't sink in. You still sometimes get judged unfairly. That happens, doesn't it? Acts 21, verse 30 now. Then all the city was stirred up, and the people ran together. They seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and at once the gates were shut. And as they were seeking to kill him, word came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. He at once took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Well, it appears that this crowd was beating Paul for some time enough for the news of this riotous mob to reach a Roman official, and for him to gather soldiers and for them to all make their way to where Paul was being beaten. So this crowd did not just want to see Paul dead. They were actively trying to kill him. Verse 23, when the tribune came up and arrested him, then the tribune came up and arrested him, Paul, and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. He inquired who he was and what he had done. So at this point, the prophecy that we talked about last time, made by Agabus in verses 10 and 11, came true. Now, some have tried to make a big deal out of this by saying that the Romans bound Paul and not the Jews, as Agabus had said. But as you can see in the text, Paul is being bound because of the Jews and their actions. And it's kind of like when you look at, well, who killed Jesus? Well, you can say that the Romans killed Jesus because they crucified him. You can say that the Jews killed Jesus because they arranged it. You can say God the Father sacrificed Jesus because Jesus was obeying the will of the Father. Or you can say that it was our sin, yours and mine, that was a reason for Jesus being crucified. Acts 21, verse 34. Some in the crowd were shouting one thing, some another, and as he, the Roman tribune, could not learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him, Paul, to be brought into the barracks. So people are accusing Paul of things, and their accusations are conflicting with each other. It sounds very much like what happened to Jesus, doesn't it? In Mark chapter 14, beginning verse 45 there in Mark 14. Excuse me. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. And some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.' Yet even about this, their testimony did not agree." So Acts 21:35. When he came to the steps, he was actually carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. For the mob of the people followed, crying out, "Away with him!" Excuse me. Away with him. They were not saying, "Make Paul leave the city." They meant, kill him. The soldiers had to carry Paul to separate him from the crowd. Verse 37. As Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the tribune, "May I say something to you?" And he said, "Do you know Greek? Are you not the Egyptian then, who recently stirred up a revolt and led 4,000 men of the assassins out into the wilderness?" Paul replied, "I am a Jew from Tarshish in Cilicia, a citizen of no obscure city. I beg you, permit me to speak to the people." Here Paul is all beat up. You know, Paul had to have flashbacks to when Stephen was in Jerusalem and being dragged out, and they were ready to stone him, and eventually did stone Stephen. And Paul was there watching and giving his approval. So Paul here is in Jerusalem with an angry Jewish crowd, trying to kill someone that they have been told things about that were not even true. Paul is bruised and battered, but he sees this as a wonderful opportunity to tell his Jewish brethren about Jesus and what Jesus has done for him. Wow. Verse 40. And when he had given him permission to speak, Paul, standing on the steps, motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great hush, he addressed them in the Hebrew language, saying, well, see, here we have one of those unfortunate chapter breaks. Remember, the chapter breaks are not inspired. But to give Paul's speech the time that it deserves, we'll begin chapter 22 next time. I hope you have a blessed day.
If you would like more information or if you'd like to participate in our Bible studies and worship services, we would love to have you come join us at the Northeast Church of Christ in Albuquerque, New Mexico.